to our voices, but welcome. It is a sunny and lovely day on the corner of Glenwood and Lunt. You are tuned in to Live from the Heartland, following as we do every Saturday morning at 9 a.m., bringing good folks to the stage at the Heartland Cafe, and while others are eating breakfast and discussing the state of the world, we're up here trying to fill in the blanks and let people know about good people doing good things for the rest of the world and our neighborhood and beyond. And as usual, we're dealing with everything from local to global today. My name is Katie Hogan. I'm sitting in on my own today because my co-host Michael James is off with the very important work of babysitting his granddaughter out east. You know how these grandparents get. I mean, you know how this is yet, Jeff?
No.
Yeah, wait till you do this thing. All of my friends who are parents, you know, they're now grandparents. It's like they've hit the flippin' jackpot. They cannot go anywhere without pictures, and they whip them out, which I'm happy to see. I love to see them. But it's like the big payback. It's like, oh my God, all that work, all the 25 or whatever years of work to raise a human being into a functioning ally on the planet, bringing forth new life. Oh my Lord. It's something about that legacy thing, I guess. Anyway, I'm very happy for Michael, Paige, and all the grandparents I know because they are bringing forth great people to put work into the future. And the future is something that is very much on our minds today. We've got three guests. We're going to talk about fracking with Jen Walling in a little bit. We're going to talk about the climate cliff and the climate crisis with Deborah Michaud from the Rainforest Action Network. And we're going to kick it off today with our good friend and artist. Is it okay to call you an artist, Jeff?
Sure.
Yeah. Jeff Spitz. Welcome back to the show, Jeff Spitz.
Thanks, Katie.
We're sorry your lovely wife isn't joining us today. I know she is your partner not only in family but also in this project. So let me just kick this off. It's foodpatriots.com. Food Patriots, a very cool little carrot logo. Reminds me of a bar I used to hang out, but that's another thing. Food Patriots is both a story and a movie, and it springs from your lives, you and your wife Jennifer and your two wonderful boys. Yeah. So talk to us about Food Patriots, because food is really what it's all about right now in so many ways. So you're right on time.
Thanks, Katie. Well, we have two sons. One's 17, the other's 22. And Jennifer thought it would be a good idea 2 years ago, to teach her men where food comes from.
What a smart lady.
And what's in it.
Yeah.
And I thought that just sounded like kind of an interesting comment, but I didn't really see anything tangible there, and I was happily ignorant of where food comes from and what's in it, and willfully ignorant.
Willfully, happily.
And I thought, I go to places like the Heartland Cafe, and I like the vibe, and I like the food, and I like the people, and I went to Berkeley when I was in college, and I grew up in Southern California, and in every place I've been, food has not been an issue to me because it's always been available, and it's always been affordable, and I've always looked for the stuff that tastes good. And until Jennifer pursued this idea to the point where she said, we're going to get chickens, this really didn't register deeply with me. When the chickens showed up, my life changed.
Is that a kind way of saying your mind went, WTF, wifey old mine? No, something like that? Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Well, when little 2-day-old chickens arrive at your house, they bring with them a lot of excitement and a lot of questions. And the excitement and questions started to percolate for me. I took out the camera and started filming. And my kids got into it. Their friends got into it. I got into it. And everybody who came and saw these little chickens running around our suburban house in Northbrook, Illinois, got very curious about why we were doing this. And so Food Patriots is the story of what happens when you make a small shift in your life and try to change the way you eat, buy, and teach the next generation about food. It's a film, now about 70 minutes. The rough cut is getting attention as we're being invited to show it at community meetings and at conferences and at schools, and we've even shown it at a storefront church on the west side of Chicago.
Cool.
People are concerned about food, and more they're wondering what's in it, where's it from, and how do I change from unhealthy choices toward healthier ones.
Right. Well, and being in a church on the west side, you're right in the middle of what, started getting called a few years back food deserts, which is, parts of the city, parts of beyond the city limits, where folks and communities are so poor as to not have a whole lot of retail anyway, but most especially what's missing is a grocery store. Anything other than the corner kind of bodega type shop that sells mostly food in plastic bags, and chips and soda and whatnot, which is the diet of a lot of poor kids in our city. So you were right in the right place showing that in a storefront church on the west side. So you started with chickens, and how many seasons have you gone through with chickens? This
is now our second full year coming on. We got them in April last year. And so all of this has been happening fast.
You're newbies. Yeah, it does happen fast.
In fact, I want to show you what's possible after you've had chickens and become a chicken farmer. You couldn't do this if you're an environmentalist or if you're, let's say, a politician. What? Unless you have a secret life as a chicken farmer, you can't do what I'm about to do.
What are you about to do? Remember, this is radio.
This is for you, darling. This was laid just this morning by Nigel of Northbrook.
I love it. Wow.
That's a fresh egg.
Very fresh. My goodness. And for those of you out in our listening audience, audio visuals don't work all that well on radio, except when you do like we do, put it on YouTube. But here is a nice brown egg. It has lost the warmth of this morning, but mostly because it drove in with you from Northbrook. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We actually have in this neighborhood quite a few chicken householders, including Tom Clark, who's sitting over there in his normal Saturday morning spot.
Well, the difference between where we are right now at the Heartland Cafe and where I live in Northbrook is the law. As it turns out, we got chickens thinking, well, we're going to have a few of them in our backyard, and what's the big deal? Well, it turns out there are ordinances. Ordinances everywhere, every small village and town, and, of course, big city. And in Chicago, it's perfectly legal to have a few chickens.
Right.
Evanston just revised their ordinance so that 20 people in Evanston can have chickens.
Only 20?
And so that they can have 4 hens and no roosters.
No roosters.
And there are other little laws that pertain to raising backyard chickens. And suburbs all over the metro area are having debates now.
Right.
Ours didn't have a debate going, and in fact, nobody was talking about this.
Right.
When we let our little chickens outside on the very first day they were big enough to roam around, they met a very enthusiastic neighborhood dog.
Oh.
And we lost half our flock. So 2 of our chickens were killed instantly first day they went outside.
Nice work.
Now, we learned that other people were interested.
You're supposed to be a little more protective of the little suckers,
right,
aren't you? Like fences and stuff.
Well, we learned that free range is a good concept unless you're in the suburbs where people have dogs. So what happened was that other people learned about backyard chickens in Northbrook, and some folks said, hey, we'd really like to have chickens too. And they said they'd like to do it legally. We found out that there was actually an ordinance, an old ordinance that said you cannot have chickens unless you have 2 acres. It was like you can have small farm animals on 2 acres, but chickens qualify as small farm animals, and most people can't afford to have 2 acres in Northbrook, Illinois.
Right.
So other people went to the village hall invited me to come and talk, and my wife, and we did. And there was a debate, and that's in the film. There was a vote, and this is happening in Mundelein, it's happening in Long Grove, it's happening in Palatine, and all of these suburban areas now have people talking about raising chickens in their backyard for fresh eggs.
And is it so far a friendly conversation?
You know, it's surprisingly controversial. You wouldn't think so.
No,
it is
no,
not entirely friendly, and you'll see in our film that it gets somewhat heated. People also want the right to not live next door to chickens.
Sure.
And they're quite
adamant about
vocal and determined to stop it. So we've run into some interesting opposition. We think the debate is healthy. We're okay with having this dialogue. But the purpose of our film is to reach outside of the so-called good food revolution. So if you're listening to this show and you feel like you're already in that world of good food, we're creating a tool for you to use with your relatives and friends and the people who roll their eyes when you talk about making healthy choices or eating organic or going to a farmer's market. I was one of those people. I totally get where they're coming from. I was one of the eye rollers and people who didn't want to hear about food.
And what changed you besides the chickens?
Well, there's
the story of your sons?
There's a lot of turning points, but the biggest is that my son, Sam, got a foodborne illness, and he lost about 30 pounds. He lost a month of school. We didn't know really why he was resistant to the antibiotics that doctors gave him. And we learned about antibiotic resistance in food, in animal agriculture, that 80% of our antibiotics in this country go to animals that are in confinement operations, because if one little illness of some kind, one virus gets into a confinement shed, it can wipe out a farmer's hogs or a whole flock of chickens. We're talking 100,000 birds. And so they're given antibiotics to prevent the loss of that kind of livestock, but only because of the way they're managed. If they weren't kept in gigantic confinement operations, they wouldn't be needing all of our antibiotics. Now, this may sound like an arcane point, but if you get a kid who's sick and his body won't respond to antibiotics, you'll realize that the reason is, in part, antibiotics are a social type of medicine. They work because of their rareness, not because of their ubiquitousness. The fact that they're ubiquitous in our environment has made them less effective. So we're looking at, according to many experts, a future without antibiotics. That means pneumonia, gonorrhea, a number of diseases that people have taken for granted because they can be treated effectively will no longer be treated effectively. Can you imagine getting E. coli or salmonella poisoning, and there's nothing doctors can do for you?
I don't want to imagine that.
You're in the restaurant field. You know how significant this is.
No, it's really significant. And I mean, part of the issue with the foodborne disease also now is the fact that where your food comes from, which you already mentioned, knowing where your food comes from. There was a flick, I only caught it recently when I was actually down in Central America. You run across strange things when you're on foreign TV, but I never saw the movie Contagion before. And this is reminding me of that, which was Contagion that came out of a pig lot in China. Okay, so if we're doing things that come from places on the other side of the world where the rules are not the same, and where currently you can cut the air with a knife in Beijing. All right, so the inequality of our environmental awarenesses around the planet are going to be in sharp review for all of us to see as this conversation continues. So you're making a really important film and raising a really important issue. You described a tool, and I just want to, before we slip into our next guest, tell me what the 10% notion is, and then of course also where people can hook up and get more information on foodpatriots.com.
Well, foodpatriots.com is a 2.0 interactive website, and there's a lot of short video clips that are used as conversation starters by all kinds of people, even football coaches and health and fitness trainers, because many people aren't ready to change and aren't aware of any issues having to do with food and health. So we've created these sort of friendly little videos that are accessible now. We've created pages for people to participate. 10 steps you can take if you want to start now. The point is, this is for consumers, people who may only be hearing about this for the first time. It's really just a zero-depth pool, like the kind of shallow little pool that little children, toddlers, can wade into with their parents and just get their toes wet if they want. Or they can keep going and it will get them in up to their knees. But you hardly notice that you're getting wet, and it's super safe. And our way into this consciousness is through 10% shift in the way you eat, buy, or teach your children about food. 10% can mean just ordering a side salad if you walk into McDonald's. It can mean coming to the place where in the morning you decide to have apples and oatmeal instead of Trix, instead of, let's say, Fruit Loops. And so the little things that I used to eat routinely, like boxes after boxes of Golden Grams, where I would fist them and have this huge sugar butt